Amazon's flagship MMORPG New World is set to release soon, and it's looking better than ever. This game is absolutely massive, and after investing hours into learning the game's core systems and mechanics, we've noticed that New World has plenty of secrets that it never fully explains to players. In this video, we're breaking down those hidden beginner tips to get you off to the best start possible, and that list starts right now. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and we're talking about New World today. Before we get into things, we do have a website, rpgdojo.com, with even more New World tips and tricks. Be sure to check that out. For tip number one, let's dive into the game settings, and specifically, there's some useful HUD options that the game should probably have on by default, but they aren't, or at least they weren't on in the final beta. For example, you can actively show both your weapons and their corresponding skill timers at once, rather than just one at a time. To activate this, you would go to the settings menu, then gameplay, and turn on HUD always show weapons. In addition to this, there's another great option which gives you another cooldown timer in a more central location on the screen. This one is called show extra ability cooldowns. I recommend you turn that on as well. Now obviously your visual settings will be mostly dependent on your PC, but there is a handy FOV slider which I prefer to max out right away. The FOV slider had a maximum of setting during the closed beta, which is a nice improvement over the default setting. And by the way, you can zoom the camera in and out with the mouse wheel by default to give you a wider view of the game as well. Next, let's talk about an important skill early on in New World, and that is cooking. Specifically, you're going to need to cook some basic rations while you're out fighting enemies, because the extra health recovery from these keeps your HP topped off in between fights. Now, the game's basic tutorial does show you how to cook using meat from skinned animals, but something it doesn't mention is that in this game you can cook with almost anything, including mushrooms, nuts, eggs, fish, and even milk. This is one of my favorite features in New World because it adds a lot of flexibility to the crafting system. Now that you know this, you don't need to bother with killing and skinning animals for your food, which can be time consuming, especially at the start of the game. A much easier option if your starting town has it is to milk the cow and use that milk to make rations at a camp or the town's cooking station. This basically gives you an unlimited supply of the most important buff you need, especially at the start of the game, which is that health regeneration. Now while we're in town getting some free stuff for our character, you'll want to keep an eye out for free faction resources like this supply cart. These are located in most settlements in the game, and they offer varying resources including food, lumber, iron, fibers, and more. The trick here is you can't access the resources unless your faction controls the settlement. But if they do, make sure to pick these up, as you can also use them to complete town projects for bonus experience and gold. One more tip here that has to do with crafting and specifically your storage. That is, any crafting resources that you stored in your settlement shed can be used at any of the crafting stations in that settlement. For example, I've been collecting some stone in my storage shed. I also have 13 currently on my character that I've just mined. And when I go to the crafting station for stone, all 58 of these are available to craft with. I have some on my player character, but I have a lot more in storage. Now this is great because crafting materials can be extremely heavy to carry around, especially with a large stack of them. The more you stack up, the more that they weigh. Keep in mind though that this crafting trick only works while you are in the same settlement as your storage shed. Another important thing to know about sheds is that the storage is unique to each settlement. This means that you have a different storage inventory in each settlement where you've actually used the shed. This is different from a lot of other MMOs like the Elder Scrolls Online, for example, where you have a consistent bank that's accessible no matter where you are. New World is actually a bit different. Now you actually can transfer between sheds if and only if your faction controls both territories. Keep in mind though that transferring items between settlements is not free, and you need to pay a price per item if you want to use this trick. For tip number 5, let's take a break from settlements and talk about combat for a minute. Combat in New World includes many different weapon types, which have just as many different forms of damage. This includes things like elemental damage, such as fire and ice, and various physical damage types, including slashing, blunt, and thrust damage. Damage type becomes important in New World because enemies have specific resistances and weaknesses, as noted by the color of your damage numbers when in combat against them. White numbers indicate a neutral damage type, while yellow indicates weakness, and blue indicates resistance. For example, the Corrupted are weak to thrust damage from the spear's basic attacks, but they are strong against slash damage, which is dealt by the spear's sweeping ability. So as you can see, one weapon can deal multiple different types of damage depending on the different abilities that are used. Finally, critical damage is indicated by an orange damage number. And by the way, attacking enemies with a melee weapon from behind is always a guaranteed critical strike, also known as a backstab, which can make for an extremely powerful way to start off a fight, or a great reason to use crowd control and move behind an enemy, or to face enemies away from your group if you are a tank. Now, you may have been wondering about armor weights in New World, which is also a little bit tricky to understand as a new player. First of all, every piece of armor in the game has a designation as light, medium, or heavy. This affects both the weight of the piece and the total physical and elemental resistance it gives you. Light armor will have the lowest resistances, while heavy armor will have the highest. This brings us to the equipment load system, which defines your character further as a light, medium, or heavy build based on their overall weight, and then gives you bonuses based on that type. For example, by wearing 4 pieces of light armor and 1 piece of medium armor, your build will fall into the light category, which gives you 20% increased damage to all your attacks, and gives you the strongest form of dodging possible, the roll dodge. The light armor equip load is great for damage dealers and even solo players if you can learn to effectively dodge when you need to, because you will take a lot more damage if you get hit. A medium equip load offers you 10% bonus damage as well as 10% bonus to crowd control durations, and turns your dodge into a quick hop instead of a roll. Finally, the heavy equip load has no bonus to damage, but it does offer a 15% bonus to blocking and a 20% longer duration to those crowd control effects. And dodging while under heavy equip load, it's more of a slide or a shuffle kind of movement. Now, bonus tip here is that shields also make a difference to your equip load, even if you aren't using the sword and shield as your weapon. This means you can equip a shield to increase your total equip load from medium up to heavy, even if you're not wearing enough heavy armor pieces. This is great for PvP builds and group builds like healers for increased survivability. Tip number 7 has to do with reducing your total encumbrance. Basically, you never want to be over your weight limit in New World because you can no longer run and you can't fast travel. And while there are buffs to increase how much gear you can carry, including bags and some certain traits, even with those, it's easy to run out of space fairly quickly. For example, on my character here, I've almost reached my current limit of 250, but I also have some slots on my character which are currently open, including my shield slot, ammo slots, and consumables. And what you'll find here is that as soon as you equip items to those slots, your total weight will actually go down. So I can equip my ammo, my arrows, my shield, and even any extra potions that I have to reduce my total overall weight. Things like ammo and arrows can also be quite heavy, especially if you have a big stack collected. So if you have them on your character, make sure to also equip them to reduce their effective weight to 0. The last point on armor that we need to cover is repairing and salvaging. First, you need to know that all armor and weapons in New World have a durability score. Higher quality items will have greater durability scores to start with, but every piece of gear will lose durability over time, especially when your character dies. Once durability on the item reaches 0, it cannot be used until it is repaired. And speaking of repair, there are repair kits in the game that you can use, but these are actually fairly expensive to obtain, and they also can be limited to specific tiers of equipment. A much better option is to use the salvage system, which destroys your unwanted gear in return for gold and generic repair parts. These repair parts are basically free, and they're also not limited to working only on specific tiers of equipment. You can actually use them to repair anything. Plus, in New World, you get tons of armor and weapon drops all the time that you will have no use for, that are simply eating up that carrying capacity, so just salvage those babies right away so you can repair and maintain the gear that you actually want to use. One more tip about gear, and that is locking your items. This will be especially important if you carry multiple weapons or armor types that you frequently switch between. Locking an item basically turns off the ability for you to salvage it, meaning you won't accidentally salvage your prized, epic quality, gem-socketed, perfectly traded weapon or armor piece. Just right-click and choose the lock option, or hold down L and left-click. You Tip number 10, let's talk about fast travel options. Now, most players do know about using the inn for recall. That's a 60-minute timer on that one, and you do need to register at the inn of your choice in order to use that option. Then there's the spirit shrines for fast travel, pretty much exactly like way shrines in other games like ESO. You pay a fee in Azoth in order to use these. And then there's the other main form of fast travel in New World, and that is just dying. In New World, death sends you back to the nearest settlement or camp of your choice, so it is technically a form of fast travel. And the tip here is that you don't actually need to die to enemies to use this feature. You can respawn anytime that you want by using the menu and selecting the respawn option. Keep in mind that it does work just like a death though, where your items will lose their durability, but it can be a helpful time saver, especially if you set up your camp in just the right way, where you can quickly respawn at the exact area that you want to. Tip number 11 has to do with trading posts, which is where you can buy and sell items in New World. The interface and options on the trading post are quite good generally, but you might have missed that you can show items not just at your current settlement, but at any other settlement in the world. Now, this doesn't mean that you can buy items directly from other settlements, though that would be a nice feature to add eventually. It just means that you can search in any settlement that you want, and if you find the item you want to buy, you'll know where you need to go to get it. This brings us to our final tip for this video, which is how to hide your helmet in New World. Now in this game, hiding your helmet is actually coded as a skin, and a skin just means an additional look for a specific piece of armor. In this case, it's the look of basically being invisible. So you click on the helmet to start, you click on change skin, and then click on hide your headgear. This is the only hide function I could find in case you were wondering. No hidden pants or chest pieces here, sorry. So there you go, 12 beginner tips New World never really explains. I actually have more tips I wanted to share, including how to see your current territory bonus, tips on dyeing your armor, and a lot more. You can find all of those in the written version of this guide at our website, rpgdojo.com. The link for that guide will be in the description and the pinned comment down below, so feel free to check it out. And if you have any fantastic beginner tips of your own that I missed, please let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video today or you found it at all informative, do us a favor, crush that like button. And if you really liked it, consider subscribing for more New World content. We've got a lot more planned on this channel, including guides and even builds for New World coming soon. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you around in the next video.